All right, we're gonna jump right in.
I mean, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I don't know what normal is. I don't think I've ever had normal. I hide behind this humor shield, you know. Definitely need to edit that little bit because I'm like, blah, blah. It's like I'm snarky. And hi, I'm Robin Reul, and I am an author. I write young adult novels currently. These are my two books. This is My Kind of Crazy, which is my first one. And this is my brand new one that's coming out on April 6th called Where the Road Leads Us. A good cover helps. A good cover determines whether or not it's going to be face out at Barnes and Noble. A good cover makes all the difference of a book getting noticed. I got really lucky with this one. It's like so poppin' and beautiful that it's attracted a lot of attention just for its cover without people knowing what it's about. This is actually, I was given a choice of several covers, and there's a whole thought process, and it's a big deal of what goes into the covers. And Barnes and Noble actually has even input on that because it goes on their shelf. So they actually have a say if they don't like the cover and they don't think it'll sell, that has something to do with it. And so I got to choose which cover color I liked. And I had issues with the positioning of the girls' hands. So you can see how they are. And because it's a funny story, but there's also serious stuff. The first picture they sent me with the girls' hands, they were up in the air like, wee. And I'm like, you know, she looks like she's on a joy ride, and she's actually like on a car ride to go see a friend that's dying of cancer, and this is her last chance to see him. I don't think that's how it should be. So we had about 3 or 4 back and forths just on hand positioning, and I won. And that's kind of where we compromised is there. They're all about like what will make it have longevity on a shelf and sell more copies. And because a book gets like 3 months on a shelf in Barnes and Noble. And if it's not regularly selling in 90 days, it's out of there because they need to make space for new books. So it's got to be eye-catching. And it's amazing how much they're all in control of something like that, even though, you know, I create the words. I get the smallest piece of the pie too. It's crazy. So I feel like this is actually a stronger book for me. I mean, it's serious and it's also really funny. I think people from the description think it's going to be this heavy book, and it actually isn't really a heavy book. It's like all these heavy things that are going on, but it's actually kind of a funny book. It kind of paralleled the journey of my life, of what happened kind of after My Kind of Crazy. When My Kind of Crazy came out, the week after it came out, my father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And we ended up on this like 9-month journey of trying to get him well. There was just a lot of different pieces that were floating about that suddenly kind of morphed together to create the backbone of certainly the boy's story, because this was written originally entirely from his point of view. And it wasn't until we went into revisions that we built out the girl's voice as her own voice. Hallie is the girl character. And her struggle was she has cancer, a type of cancer that can come back. And so it's kind of kept her in a holding pattern, as you know, about being scared to live her life because she's scared that she won't have a place in it. And I remember my dad kind of going through some of that, and what is that to exist in the world when you don't know if you have a place at the table, and you know, so much of all of that. And I think in general, just this whole book is kind of a big homage to letting go. There's so many different things that we let go of, that we need to let go. And I mean, if that's sort of the theme of the whole book is about learning to let go in order to move forward. Yeah. And that was sort of where my life was for the time I was writing this. Sure. And so that's kind of how I write. I try and keep it hopeful. I try and keep it funny, even as they're dealing with things that are incredibly serious. I mean, this book has a lot of like kind of parental neglect, and there's some estrangement, there's drug abuse, there's assisted suicide, there's cancer, there's, you know, grief, there's anxiety and, you know, depression and all kinds of issues that teens are all facing. I mean, adults are all facing. So there's a lot of universal truths that I try and touch on in that. so that people from all over and all ages can find something in it that feels like it resonates with them and feels as true. It was a good way to work it all out. It was great therapy. My dad was a producer and a studio head. And so from the time I was, I guess, about 5, I would be pulled out of school like, 3 to 6 months a year. We'd go on location for different films that he had. So it was not uncommon for me to be gone and be in the presence of all adults. And, I got my love of drinking black coffee from being on movie sets at age 5. I've been drinking it since age 5 because you got to keep warm on a night shoot, right? And then when I was 13, I said, I don't want to travel anymore. I want to be home with my friends. And that's when he started doing studio jobs. And he was the senior VP of worldwide production at Disney and at United Artists, at MGM. And then ultimately, he retired in his 50s and moved up to Seattle when my husband and I moved up to Seattle to go work on Bill Nye the Science Guy for years. And that was it. And he was grandpa after that. So my life was just a lot of traveling around. I hated it as a kid. I mean, because it's like life went on without me at school. And so it was harder for me to relate to kids because I was more used to relating to adults, and loss in that sense has been a thread of my whole life.
Yeah.
Always working that out, that just when you start to feel connected to someone, then the circumstances change. And in fact, that whole first book, My Kind of Crazy, was based on a personal loss that I had. I mean, it's not the direct translation of that story, but when I was in high school, my closest friend from high school, we'd had this really amazing friendship. I was a really troubled kid in high school, just dealing with a lot emotionally. And she kind of reached out and saw past the groups and the cliques and was like, hey, I'm part of this youth group that meets in Eagle Rock, actually. And would you like to come with me to these meetings? And I think it'll really help you. And she just really tried to help me through. And then, she passed in a car accident, was hit by a drunk driver. And I kind of carried around the story of that friendship in me forever, but I didn't want it to be like this negative, dark story, because that's just not what I wanted to write. And so I found that kind of in these two people that just sort of get each other in this other way where other people don't, and support each other and help each other find the light in the darkness. And because that's what she did for me. And so that was, I think, probably one of the first friendships I had that was like that. And then 3 months after she died, I started college. When I was in elementary school, everybody knew I was a writer. And so that was just who I was. And then I think that really saved me as a kid, because when you're alone by yourself that much, if you got to be a reader or a writer, or a video game professional, I guess. And I guess I was all 3, but it's, you have to find something. And so, from the time I was 3 years old, I had a table in my room. My mother always had all these fresh markers and pens and a pile of paper, and it was just there. And every day I would just sit and write stories. Got a typewriter when I was like 9, and I used to type books on the typewriter. And then I had my first meeting with a publisher when I was 13, and that was amazing. And she handed me this stack of books. She said, these are all books from writers who write very similar to you, but their work is a little more polished, and you should study these, and you can learn about writing. And I encourage you, anything you write from now on, you just send it directly to me, which is in publishing like a Wonka golden ticket. I mean, that just doesn't happen. I think it's really about trying on lots of hats and not just having anybody tell you that you have to have that figured out. That is literally what this new book is about, is that feeling of like, you're turning 18, you're going off to college, you're supposed to have your whole life figured out. You got to know where you want to go, what you want to major in, what field, what this, what that. And then you look at people who have this advantage or that advantage, and it's like, you just feel lost. I don't think you have to know. And I think that it is entirely reasonable for that to change 10 times. Like just drawing from my own experience. Starting out, I was a writing and publishing major at Emerson. I switched to being a film major. I went to Arizona State University. I became a broadcast journalism major. And then I switched to something else. I can't even remember what. And then I went to BU, and then I was a film major again. And I graduated as a film major, and here I am, and I'm right back to writing and publishing, right? So, you know, I think it's reasonable to try lots of things, and to think that you are always going to want what you want when you're 18 years old is actually ridiculous. I mean, we grow, we change, we meet people, we have different opportunities. Be open. I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I lacked the self-confidence that I could be a good writer. I was fearful of rejection. But for me, I think that I went in the direction of the film stuff because that is what my dad did, because I knew that I could get a job out of college, that he would certainly be able to have known enough people that he could get me, you know, an interview somewhere to be a PA. To, you know, what I did with it was up to me ultimately. Yeah. But I was so scared of what that was to just do it on my own and fail that I took the easy route. And very often I think when we take the easy route, it catches up to us somewhere. And it did for me. I still find film really fun and really interesting. And I do wish at times I'd seen it further through. But my reasons for going into it weren't the right ones. It was really just fear that stood in my way. You got to take a chance, though. You have to, because if you don't, somebody else will. I'm what's known as a pantser. A pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants, meaning they have no outline, they have no idea what's going to happen until the moment that they're sitting down and writing that scene. Maybe I know how something's going to end, maybe I know a plot point that's going to happen, but there's probably at least an 85% chance that I don't. So everything that I'm writing, I'm figuring it out, and I'm in the head of that character as I'm writing it and experiencing it, same as the reader is experiencing it. And where it all comes together and feels like, how did she do that? It feels more polished. That comes in revision, obviously, of being able to thread and piece everything together. For some reason, my characters come into my head as boys. I don't know why, which makes it tricky to pull off because obviously I'm not a boy, but I have to think like one. So, and having to, teens are really smart. So for them to accept that this is a boy, I have a lot of work to do. It takes a lot of research, and that comes from reading a lot of boy protagonist books that I read written by men. Every single sentence really matters. Every line of dialogue really matters. It has to be something that's either moving the story forward or developing the character or developing an arc of the story. If it, literally every sentence, if it's not in service of that, it probably doesn't belong there. And that's what, you know, bogs down pacing when you have all those extraneous details and unnecessary things. As long as everything keeps moving in that direction, your reader's engaged. And the idea is to make them not able to put that book down. You don't want them to be like, oh, well, I've reached the end of the chapter and I'm going to stop here. No, you want them to keep going. And that flow of like, well, I want to know what happens next means that you've set up everything right. You've only put in those details that keeps them building. There's my writing 2 cents. I'm Robin Reul, and I'm an author.